And so my point in giving you some of this background is to say, as a concerned owner, as a real estate investor, as a real estate industry guy, I think it's critically important that we educate ourselves around the governing laws that oversee the homeowner industry, homeowner association industry, and understand outside of the influence of our vendors what my powers are to represent you and what our collective powers are to manage ourselves. By the way, I'm not suggesting we self-manage, that's not what I mean. I simply mean that we all will benefit when things are not going well, to understand what we actually have the ability to do. And so that is why we invite Dennis and Jared, us inviting Dennis and Jared to come tonight. Again, we pay for that, or I'll obviously we feel that's wrong. I'm guessing nobody that's unaware of the board is being very hostile. Lincoln. So I hope that will be seen transparently. Some of you may or may not like what I've done or what I've said or anything along the way, but my goal is to educate, and that is why I'm running on this. And brought in here with a group of other homeowners. So, with that in mind, yes.
Thank you. Again, I'm Legere, and founded and lead the coalition of homeowners, the Arizona Homeowners Coalition. In 2016, I took my association to court for blatant open meeting violations. And 4 charges, won all 4 counts, all without a lawyer. And the association was so egregious in their abuse of the law that they were fined the largest fine. A small association of 87 homes was fined the largest fine ever applied on an association in this state. That brought some notoriety to my efforts, and I was invited to join a group of homeowners at the legislature to, through about some work on finding out what are the issues that affect these communities. We developed a lot of things. It, quite frankly, became a bitch session of a lot of complaints without a lot of solutions. So I started focusing on drafting legislation that worked to address the solutions that were made by this group of homeowners. That group became the seed that created the coalition. We started with about 16 people, and we're now at about 3,000 across the state. I travel from community to community. While Ken had to pay for this, to rent out this facility, I drafted the legislation that allowed these informal meetings of communities to get together. The intent of that legislation...
For free.
The intent of that legislation was not to have to charge the homeowners to do their business, but to apply whatever rules for housekeeping that they would have in any other use of this facility. Lawyers get to twist and distort the statutes at will. And lawyers advise boards that they can do whatever they want to. The reason for that is because, right or wrong, the lawyer always wins. The lawyer is paid whether he's right or wrong, whether he wins or loses. The associate, other than the lawyers, no one else ever wins. Homeowners never win in a lawsuit. Because even if you win, you end up paying it on the back end in increased assessments and everybody. And then you're hated in the community because you caused everybody else to incur additional expenses. So the cards are stacked against you. When I first started this process, I realized very quickly that there are 4 primary trade organizations. Ken alluded to 2 of them. AACM for the community managers, CAI for all the lawyers, the Realtors Association, and the Builders Association. Those trade organizations, before we came into play, dominated the legislature. They're the only voices that fed anything into the legislators and enacting laws. We tried to change that, and we have changed that. So at this point in time, most legislators, if they have an issue with their constituents on HOAs, will call me first to say, what can we do? How can we fix this problem? How can we address this solution? Now, we still have to fight with all the other trade organizations, and there's nothing pretty about politics. As Ken alluded to, I do this as a volunteer. There are enough people with hands in your pockets that I'm not going to be part of that game. So when I travel across the state, when I go to the legislature, that's on my dime. I don't ask for any money when people ask me to speak, nor do I ask for any money, membership dues for the people who join my coalition. It's all free. I try to share the information. My website, I believe, is built to be a source of information for all communities. There's 3.5 million people in this state alone that live in an HOA or a condominium. Over 10,000 different associations, all with different CCNRs and rules and regulations. We've got a very full plate of legislation that I've already drafted for this coming year. And now my work is focused on getting sponsors and working on getting that legislation passed and approved by the government. That's where I need people's help. Help me help you through contact and join the coalition, contact legislators when we need. As I'll track all the bills. I'm at the State House on a daily basis, working with legislators, testifying in committees on all of your behalf, so you don't have to. There are a lot of issues in this community, and I'm not here to advertise our process. I want to hear your questions, your concerns, how best that we can work on addressing the issues that you face, or any questions that you have on your particular right. Yes.
Maybe pass.
I'm kind of.
Sorry. If you're going to ask a question, ask it right up there. Close your mouth.
Okay.
This may seem very petty, but I'm the original resident of the Grange. We were the very first ones built. We're now retired, so I see what's going on. You see it all the time. We're walking the dog, I see things. So I do, as it's outlined through the HOA, submit your complaint and I take a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
I received, and I'll mention, I received an email back from Eric Cole telling me, thank you, I'm the coordinator of whatever he's a coordinator of. And now, because I've been complaining so much, I have to come up with other members in my neighborhood and have them take the same picture and submit it to him, because he's tired of just me showing the 55-foot flatbed on the Airbnb that came next door to me, or the trailer of horses that came one weekend. You know, I'm living next to a hotel.
Yeah.
There's so many complaints, but I don't want to bother and keep going into it. But, you know, I'm getting feedback when I read this business online. The HOA says they're not being respected. It was like you slapped me with a wet fish when you told me, well, we need another resident to make that complaint about garbage trash cans visible and 55-foot trailers and horse trailers coming all weekend. So I feel frustrated.
The HOA, can I speak to that first?
Yeah.
Since I'm here now. Super common. When I first got involved, homeowners were yelled at board meetings, told to shut up, told to sit down, told to minimize. You've seen heads nodding. Yeah. So this is part of the reason that our management company, who's been here for 25 years, and makes 7 figures and employs 13 full-time people, why I believe that that's maybe time to look at that. And the board has approved that we are going to. Eric Cole is head of enforcement. That's his job. He came from a prison. He's a good guy to work with. I'll tell you that. Much better than the previous individual. But that is his job in this role.
So
So why do we need 2 people?
I have no idea why that is. But what I would say is please email, copy me. I'm glad to help.
all right, Ken.
Yeah. I'll make sure you have my email address.
Okay.
Transparency in the business of this community will build trust in the conduct of the administration of this community. Trust builds respect. Respect builds a community. Without that chain of events, you have no chance. Respect is on the 3rd branch of that. If the board wants to get trust and respect, they need transparency in the conduct of their business. Be frank and open on how we are running this community, and all of you will feel better about this community. With that trust, there won't be arguing and bickering back and forth because you feel like you're being screwed in the back end. So, but that respect comes from trust. It is not prior to trust.
Hi, I have 2. Like, I bring 2 up. One is this affects the whole community, so I'll bring it up. I barely knew the community. I lived in 4 years ago. The first thing I did was to just walk paths and get familiar with my community, and thought I moved into a great place because I literally thought, from the past things I heard about Power Ranch, it was a great community and well managed, which was what I was looking for. And first things I saw were tons of dead plants, which I thought was kind of bad. Why are we watering dead plants? We're supposed to be saving water. But the biggest thing was the gophers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I brought the gophers up. So one of the days I was on my walk, I just decided to walk in and just speak to them. And they blatantly told me, we know all about it. It's just a hard problem to solve. And we've got a guy working on it. He puts his traps out. Can't have a trap for every hole. So it's going to take a while. This went on for 4 years. And I know my first homeowners meeting that I went to, which was almost 2.5 years later, because I realized I'm not the only homeowner. I realized there's a lot they have to deal with. I try to be patient and just wait. Let them do their job. So I went into that, and the thing was there were 10 people in that meeting complaining about the gophers. It's still a problem, which I realized too, but everybody else was now up in arms about it. They discussed it all over again. We had a party next door from another subdivision next door that said they had the same problem, had found a fantastic exterminator, and wanted to offer, their information so we could use them, and they didn't. They said, no, we're going to continue using the same guy. He's got a different plan. He's going to keep, working at it. And they asked if he was the only one that if they got additional bids. They said, no, we've used him. We're just going to continue using him. So that's still the problem now. We finally now, 1.5 years later, did go with that guy. I asked why we didn't take that advice 1.5 years ago. And I got a shrug. They literally shrugged their shoulder. I don't know. And I literally, for the first time, because I'd been managing it myself, I knew that it wasn't working. I had to go out of town and put an order in. Got a response saying, we got your work order. Came back, and been in and out of town a bunch of times over 5 weeks. Realized nothing had been done. I finally called and said, are you guys going to come and address it? I started out with 3 holes. I had 30 holes by the time I called them back 5 weeks later. 30. I still have not seen them. This has been another 4 weeks since I've done that. And I'm out doing my best job of trying to control it.
So the boards in these communities are volunteers. They're individuals that happen to be residents within the community, and they can only do so much. That's why you hire a community manager. We can then hire other craftsmen to do the jobs of what they are paid to do. And that's the point that I get frustrated with the most. Community managers look at any opportunity to make more money and do less work. So what I hear across the state is complaints like this. they're being paid to do this job, yet they don't want to do it because it's work.
Well, and that's the point. They were given, you know, great advice from a community right next door that had the same problem. They didn't take it because they just didn't want to go out and get bids, or they didn't want to address it with a new guy and bring that all in. So that was one of my first frustrations. My next one is my subdivision has a 6-year plan that was supposed to have started 3 years ago. It's still not started. So even if it does get addressed, it's going to be 9 years. How do we get this done?
So let me kind of refocus our meeting just a little bit, because Dennis can't answer the power grid specific stuff, right?
No, I'm thinking, what I want to know is breach of contract stuff. Do we have a breach of contract there when they continue to do this kind of stuff?
I think there's plenty of reasons, and we can replace our vendors as needed, as appropriate, within the 30 days.
I mean, that was the loophole I was getting to. It's like all these breach of contracts. We have all these contracts and things are not getting done.
If I can give you my background observation on with power grids being managed by CCMC for 25 years, I think they've grown complacent. Frankly, I learned from Dennis that they have a history of growing complacent for the management of our stuff that we pay them 7 figures to do. Thing one. Thing two, when I came on the board, I was told, oh, you're a hands-off board. We don't get involved. Okay, so there's the problem. You've got a complacent management company, and board members should really want to work with their business or really want to do something, have some other agenda that business take care and make sure that our vendors.
Don't we have a breach of contract with CCMC when they
Yes, I believe we do.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right. Well, it does.
It's a visual. It's not
here's
just
the challenge.
It's constant.
Here is the challenge. There are 7 board members. 4 of us have to agree.
Good luck there.
We had 45 days of agreement when we had our new board meeting, and then everything has changed. So I hear you. I see it. Right.
Well, they're our consultant. We pay them to be our eyes and ears and look out for our best interests, and that's not happening.
If I could interject, CCMC has got a reputation. Okay, they and the law firm that represent your association are joined at the hip. They are the pair of community managers and lawyers on every high-end community in this state. Every large high-end community has that combination. CCMC's mode of operation is they write the rules. They drive the association. They don't want boards telling them what to do. And that's totally backwards.
Right.
The board runs this community. The community manager works for the board until the board gets the chutzpah to establish where they are supposed to be in the power rank of this community. Then you will be subject to the whims of that community management company, and it's wrong.
Themselves that they are too chummy with.
That's where I try to work at in legislation, to try to drive this understanding of where the responsibility for this community lies in that board. They cannot abdicate. The management company should help the board do all the business. I have probably dealt with every single management company across this state. They are all the same. Some are worse than others. None are better. The only difference that one community to another is how much the board oversees their manager. When the board tells the manager, this is how I want you to treat my people, those communities are run, irrespective of what community manager is out there. When the board gives up their responsibility to the community manager, all hell ensues and chaos goes everywhere. That's what happens in this state.
I'm forced to use their landscapers and pay a fee every month to do that. I've had dirt for a front yard for 4 years.
Yeah, I'm
like this. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and here again, same point.
It's one thing after another with, especially
why did Ann, Mike, and I run for this exact reason? Why was the recall effort for this same reason? Right? So unfortunately, there was a brief moment in time, I don't want to take the stage, but there's a brief moment in time where folks thought I might be the president. And I would tell you that I had attorney offering me anything I needed, management offering me anything I needed. I knew that was perceived as a hot potato, perhaps, however you want to put it. Not a good at it. I didn't want to cause more contention. I wanted to bring it down. I motioned for it into that role as president. But I absolutely felt, hey, let us help you. It's collusion, right? Because they get their 7-figure contracts and 7-figure lawsuits, okay? It is absolutely about the board. And this is why I think it's so critically important for especially board members, but all of us, to educate ourselves on the way things are supposed to work, not listening to the people who have drafted documents in 2011 that are completely wrong from now 5 or 6 times reading them, and or management company that can't even manage to keep the latency. That is not where we should be seeking out information and guidance. We should be seeking it independently, which is why I feel so strongly about having this. So this is not going to stop until board members can stop picking on each other and focus on the problems. And the problems are at the management nature.
Well, and if CCMC is not going out and getting the information and the board is willing to do it, or someone on the board is willing to do that investigation research, what is the harm?
I totally agree with you.
I mean, it's double-edged sword for the fact that they're doing it. Then if CCMC brings something back, they actually have the knowledge to know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
What I've learned from sitting down with Dennis 3, 4, 5 times, several phone calls, meetings in person, is that this is the common thread around the valley, right? So again, the state. So by staying focused on the problem, which is not what did Ann do or not do, which is not, what it can say or not say, which is right. It is being united about making sure that our management company gets good vendors and manages them properly and manages their finances.
Somebody that cares won't put the time in to try to find something out is not a bad thing.
No. Do you want to give it to Jesus?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Jesus first up.
I don't know the change talk, but since we have Dennis here, thanks for having Dennis. And we have a big vote coming up next year on paid parking, regardless whether you're on the side that says I want enforced parking or I don't want enforced parking. Can you give us some education on a little bit about that law? I took part in the creation of that law. Okay, it didn't end up the way I wanted it to. We wanted to establish that if you don't own the streets, you don't have a right to regulate them at all. Because that's the reality. The city owns the streets, they get to regulate. And quite frankly, they've been regulating streets far longer than any HOA ever has. The way the law was ultimately developed is we would give the communities one chance to vote to retain the right to regulate the streets, even if they don't own them. But you have a one-time vote. You get to vote to keep the control of the streets within the community or to allow the municipality to control the streets that they own, that they're responsible for, that they are in fact liable for if anybody gets hurt on your streets, or if the streets are blocked and the fire department cannot get to them. Yes. The city is liable, not you. Those are the kinds of things that vote is about. Again, my belief is the city will do a better job managing your streets than your association is. They have too much power already. Don't ever give to an association power that they can use against you that they don't deserve to have. There's a lot that they're empowered within the governing document. My perspective and what I've said to every community across the state, if you have an opportunity to vote, give it to the city or the municipality or the county, because they are responsible for it. They will respond to you the same way that your board will respond to you, but they don't know you from you or you or you. And there's no selective aspect of their enforcement. They have the power to tow any vehicle that's violating their parking restrictions. Your association does not. because you don't own the street. You can't send a tow truck to tow a vehicle on a property that you don't own. The city has the police force to be able to ticket somebody who is parking in violation of whatever regulation is out there. The association does not have that power. They don't know that car from anybody else's car, and they typically find the person who owns the property that the car is parked in front of, even though that may not have anything to do with that particular property. So their ability to enforce those regulations is limited. But their ability to abuse that, to selectively target your car, as opposed to anybody else parking in the same kind of situation, is what you need to be concerned about. The ability of these associations. Unfortunately, there's no governing body governing these communities. The only way to enforce the law on the association is to take them to court. And nobody wins in taking to court other than the lawyers, especially homeowners. So if you have to constantly struggle with the battle of, do I sue, the association is abusing their power. Do I take them to court and have everybody pissed off at me? Or do I just suck it up and swallow the fine or the penalty? Because it's cheap. And that's what they bank on. That's what they will work against you to drive that process to you. So my recommendation, again, it's all your community. That's all I can try to do. If I had my druthers, the law would have been clear. If you don't own the streets, you can't regulate. That's it. But right now, you all have one vote. Before June 30th of this year, you have to vote. If you don't pass it, the association loses the right to regulate the streets. And my belief is you don't lose any. You have the ability to talk to your city and say, I want to have a survey of my streets and look at speed limits, looking at painting sidewalks or curbs, and parking, no parking zones, no overnight parking on one side of the street, whatever is necessary to make sure that emergency vehicles can get to any home in this community at any point in the time. They do that very well across the state. The concerns, the scare tactics the lawyers are telling the boards are, we'll have RVs and we'll have trailers and utility vehicles or big trucks parked on the streets, and we won't be able to get by. Well, what I ask you is, go by any community that is not in an HOA. There aren't many, but there are some. And what you'll find is those communities have no association, only the city regulates it. And there are no RVs on the street. There's no trucks on the streets. Those are other than offloading and onloading. The same with if an RV is only onloading and offloading. That's what really exists out in the world outside of HOAs. So those arguments are nothing but scare tactics. Avoid falling into that trap.
So you're saying that the HOA does not own the streets.
That's right.
Yeah,
everybody's asking a question.
Yeah.
your statement is that the city owns the streets. Yet we pay for the maintenance of those streets. And I'm told that in cases, specifically at our ranch, there are some streets that are dedicated to. So I'm a little confused here. Okay, all the streets would be the city.
If you have a gated portion in this community, the city cannot own the streets. They are and they are the property of that association, the sub-association of that community. But you are a mixed bag. Some of your streets, most of your streets are city-owned, but there may be some portions of your community that are associational.
There are two, just to be really clear. The village and the majority of the nodes. Right? Everything else is owned and run, maintained by town.
So this bill does not apply in any way to association-owned streets. They own them, they can register. They will be responsible for anything that happens on those streets. But when the city, it's something that's spread out over the the developer built this community. When he decided that he was going to dedicate the streets to the city, he had to build the streets to the city code. He paid 3 times as much in order to build these streets in order for the city to accept them after he was finished with the development. That's the issue that's at face here. If the association owns the street, they most likely were not built to city code requirements, and the city will never, even if you took the gates away, the city will never take them unless you rip them out and then build them to their code requirements.
Luke, and what he means by association owned is the blue signs, private streets. That will never change.
Not the green signs.
The green signs will change.
Right.
Yes.
Blue signs are town government. The blue signs are us.
Private.
So the blue signs are the HOA, like those are ours. Now, so Los Altos is a blue sign. But if a fire truck were to try and go down there, they wouldn't be able to because, yes, condos.
Oh,
Yeah, so Los Altos goes past the condos down to the patio homes.
Yeah.
They park on both sides, giant trucks. So if an emergency vehicle needed to get through there, they would be able to.
Right.
So, what is it, Ranger? Yes, Ranger. So how do you work around that? I almost get hit every time I leave my house.
So if I can address that, since that's an association of Power Ranch specific. So our current parking vendor, we, management, we, the owners, can dictate how they do what they do, right? Currently, we have a broad brushstroke, but they go around the neighborhood day by day from, I think, 10 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, if I remember correctly. And for that, we pay roughly $127,000 a year. That can be changed without any vote of anybody. The board, we could say, hey, the need is here, if we could all agree, or 4 of us could agree. That can be changed. So the way it's currently enforced, or if it is chosen to keep enforcement, the way it's enforced and the areas in which it's enforced in can change.
But that's a classic example. The community wants you to allow them to continue to regulate the streets. But the few streets that they do actually own and have the full power to regulate, from your own testimony, they don't do a good job of it. Case closed.
That's actually, I actually called the police and they give it tickets on that street when it's literally parked on the sidewalk.
That's rare. Is that community gated?
No.
Nothing's gated in Power Ranch.
So, in all of my experience, police will not come on to private association property.
That street is a private, that's a city street. Ranger
City. We have the same process that I do. Green.
Okay, but like I said, I don't know the specifics of your community, but
Hang on, let's go one at a time. This gentleman had a question.
Okay. Regarding parking, from what I understand, the state of Arizona passed a law requiring HOAs to vote on parking by June 30th of next year.
that's correct.
Are you seeing HOAs, communities across the state, and maybe including Power Ranch, starting to prepare for the vote, discuss it? What are you seeing out there?
There's a lot of discussion. There's also a lot of denial. So there are a lot of communities that are not doing anything until the very last minute.
Okay.
What I see for the most part is a bunch of a narrative trying to scare homeowners in voting in the way the association wants. So I see a lot of dialogue coming from them, telling everybody that we are such a great, wonderful people. Please allow this vote and pass this vote when it comes. And all the other scare tactics that could come from it. And one of the pieces of legislation that I'll be putting forward is because the board has the bully pulpit. They have the ability to talk to 4,000 people, all with one flick of the button in an email. You don't have that. You don't have a way to counter the propaganda that comes from the board. One of my top priority bills is a bill for voting and membership will mandate that if the association communicates to you on a vote, that you can use their resources to publish an opposing view, so that the community gets two sides of the story. They're not all, when the only thing people hear is the advice from the board, people don't like controversy. And people will agree with the perspective that's sent by the board and vote accordingly. When there's an opposing position and it's logical and sound and not vindictive or attacking, then people now can wonder, wait a minute, which is true? Which is the right thing to do? And vote accordingly. So that's what I'm looking to do, is to protect your ability to balance the power between what the board has and what you need to have to affect the
So Dennis, just some clarification too on code. Town of Gilbert has code that addresses boat parking, RV parking, commercial vehicle parking. All of those things are already part of town code. So you don't need to make rules for that. They already exist. The other part of that is that this vote that's coming up is only for public streets. So it doesn't involve any private streets at all. That will still be the association's responsibility and always will be the association's responsibility.
Yeah.
So the other question I have on that though is we have to ask ourselves, why would the association want to continue to enforce parking? That's the question for me. Why do they have a desire to do that?
power. When they have the ability and the power to use parking to suppress opposition, to silence people, to retaliate against people, that serves their purpose. It's all about power. It's not about money in this case, it's about power. And again, I ask all of you to consider carefully, where do you want that power? In an impartial municipality that applies the same rules to everybody, or an association that can manipulate that power to retaliate against individuals?
Dennis, I would add that there is an aspect of the money associated with it because the association then collects fines for you violating that. And then if those fines keep building up, then they go to collection. And that's who collects the lever, collects on the collections.
One aspect of your management company is they get a piece of every fine that they apply on all of you. So there's a fee that they charge the association to even sit out a violation. And while I can't control what an association agrees to in their contracts, there's a constitutional protection that laws cannot interfere with the freedom to contract. A contract by fining you is unconscionable.
On that note, I'd like to share a story of what I experienced when I was running, and what got me involved in running. You guys might remember that maybe your gates got fined last year. How many people had gates fines for their gates not being painted or something wrong? So, I went back to the history. This is one of the reasons I reached out to an attorney. Because I went back to my history. Gosh, have I gotten fines before? Because fines in 22 seem like they're a lot of money. And I hadn't. And all of a sudden in 22, there was this big J spike of fines. And I looked at the budget. The budget was $27,000 for fines throughout our entire community. And I calculated that I was 6% of that. That one home was 6% of $27,000. I'm like, there's something wrong here. And I'm getting attitude when I call the office. Then it was Anne who said, does anybody know the individual who is responsible for Woodcrest? Carl Hewish, right? So regardless of what you think of that lawsuit, it should have been disclosed to every new home buyer by law through the process that I go through every day, with writing mortgages. And dang well should have been disclosed to us. Yet CCMC employees told us, me, in my questioning, not an executive session or some private secret meeting, that, well, it just seemed complex and so we just didn't do it, right? So then I learned that, once I got on the board, actual collections are at 5x. Actual fine collections are at 5 times the budget. And look at that. So are legal fees from this undisclosed lawsuit. There may be some very reasonable explanation. I would really struggle to digest that and believe it. Having read the lawsuit and from day one, didn't agree with the lawsuit as much as people might not want those to be rental condos. That owner, and now one of the largest insurance companies on the planet, has said he's allowed to do what he's doing. Just like the hotel that nobody wanted, entitled to what he's doing. But so in the meantime, we spent $400,000 of our money to fight that. And our insurance company spent some number as well. So a 7-figure lawsuit because board members didn't know what their responsibilities were, but we don't like that. So that's a very real world example, my opinion, of fines being raised to cover an egregious error, right? Both were 5x.
The lawsuit that affected this community directly, I actually use as an example all over the state of what an attorney can do. That attorney interpreted a statute that is totally unrelated to your assessments. It's about taxation in a way, and told your board that if they allow that condominium to go into rentals, then they will only be allowed one assessment for the entire condominium. That's total BS. It's a total unwinnable case. There was no way that any court would interpret that statute in a way that would affect your assessments or the ability of the association to assess each and every one of those units, no matter who owned them. Not the renters, the owner. So the developer who was building those condominiums would be assessed a full assessment for every single unit. Yet the association board was naive in believing their lawyer. And this is the consequence that came from that. I will close that loophole this year and clarify that statute is only about municipal and state taxes and is not related to assessments associated with the condominium. But it's the horse is out of the barn. You've been subject to that. But that's the kind of advice. The lawyer knew that what he was advising this community was absolutely wrong.
Or he should have. If he didn't, he should have.
He shouldn't be practicing law. I didn't say I'm not a lawyer. I cannot give you legal advice, but I know the law. And I know what applies to you. And I read that lawsuit and I said from the first day, there's no way in hell that case will ever win. And then the association gets countersued by another
$13 million.
that would have fallen on all of you. And the lawyer sits there fat thumb and he's making
So even if he tells us
$500,000.
win or lose, he makes the same amount.
He makes the same amount of money. Right or wrong, win or lose, he makes the same amount of money. The advice, lawyers build discontent in the community.
It's all about building.
Because building discontent generates billable hours, generates income. They are the bane of all of these communities. I passed one bill, or had one bill passed last year that directly frontally attacked lawyers' predatory correction practices for assessments and fines and penalties. I will do more this year to reduce the ability of lawyers to tap into your reserve accounts, to tap into your savings, and to just drain your savings and reserve accounts to pay for their litigation.
So, question on the parking vote. If I understand correctly, if my position were to say I don't want the association to manage it and I want it to go to the state, I don't need to do anything. Meaning, we don't need to do anything. We don't need to have a vote. It would default. Is that it? Or do we need to organize a vote and then rally people to vote it?
The way the bill is written, it's a majority of those voting. So not voting works against you. It's not a majority of the total population.
Does our association need to even? Can we not vote? Can we just simply let the law?
Hang on. If it was not on the ballot and not voted on, the ability to enforce would expire.
That's right. On July 1st, if the association has not passed a vote with a majority of those people voting on it to allow the continuation of regulating unowned streets, the streets automatically turn over to the city.
I would tell you, as a board member, I believe it needs to be voted upon because it is a contentious topic and people have an opinion. And I believe it would be dereliction of my duty not to make sure that it was voted upon, though I don't think it's important to keep bringing it.
The best thing is you get to decide, not the boards. You get to decide how this issue will be solved. And that's why I ultimately agreed to this compromise on this landscape.
What can we get from the city? What's their rules on the streets?
Well, the municipal code for Gilbert is actually very detailed. It's much more detailed than your own rules for this association. So speed limits, parking limits, restrictions on use and loading and unloading, it's all in the old municipal code. So the city then gets to apply their code to your streets the same way they apply it to every other street they own. They have to fix it. They're responsible and have accepted responsibility to maintain your roads. You don't pay the city, you're taxing for that. But if
Is this going to allow parking on both sides of the street?
the city has rules on parking based on access to emergency vehicles. So if your streets are narrow, then they will come back and say either no parking on either side or parking only on one side. Pardon?
They haven't thought that operation trail.
So
Down the street.
I believe you are in the noise.
No, well,
Knowles.
condo.
We're in the Grange.
We're in the Grange.
You're in the Grange.
I've got 7 rental properties in an Airbnb within
All
our
around.
street.
Yeah, and it's parking.
I've got trucks parking on the sidewalk because we rented it. It's an Airbnb and the owner won't let us park in the garage. I said, so I asked my board nicely, what can you do? Call the Gilbert cops and they'll tell him he's got to get off the sidewalk.
True statement.
Well, the cop called my husband Lou from his squad car on the street. He said, I can't come on your property. I won't come on your property. But I see the vehicle and And the man happened to come out of the Airbnb, and the cop politely told him, "You cannot park on a public sidewalk." They brought a boat, but the boat crossed it.
That's what's important about this particular vote, okay? Even though your city owns the streets, the CCNRs have provisions that say that the association gets to regulate, okay? Because of that, the city won't come into your streets to regulate it because the recorded document says that they can't. So by this vote, you're essentially throwing out that illegal provision in your CCNRs and allowing the city to regulate. They will come in, they will tow that vehicle, they will ticket that vehicle, they will do what is necessary to maintain your street's access.
If that's an option that the city eventually, we have a vote or an opportunity to fix, what do we do about the stuff that we are forced by the CCNRs that CCMC regulates and is supposed to enforce, but isn't? Like every single homeowner in here that does their own yard, they will get fined if they had a dirt front yard. But yet I, as a homeowner, am forced to pay for lawn service and I get nothing. And why do we have two different codes of, I mean, they would be getting fines if their yards looked like mine did.
Yeah.
So this leads right into a group of questions that David had there. David, you just walk out for a second. David is right.
That's Luke.
There is a conversation on this kind of gives some backdrop. There's a conversation of we have two benefited neighborhoods, and one of them is called the Knolls. And in 2011, a new set of CCNRs and documents was written that changes the way things are built within the Knolls, triggering a second HOA for all Knolls and a third HOA for condos. And there's a conversation. Have you taken a chance to kind of understand that at all?
I haven't seen the documents. What you just described is very suspect. When you buy the property, you are essentially agreeing to the conditions in the CCNRs that are relevant at that time. There was a court case in 2022, March of 2022, that the Supreme Court says, unless you have some notice of the changes of those in those CCNRs, those changes require unanimous consent of every homeowner. So that puts a very strict limit. The ability, when you take your assessments, and one of the things that's protected in law is your voting rights and the basis for allocating assessments. If the association tries to revise your CCNRs to change the basis, requires unanimous consent. What happens, what I suspect, is you didn't have a vote in any of those decisions to rewrite the CCNR.
I'm not aware of that piece. Maybe others are. But one thing I would say is that the way the billing for water and landscaping different services in some people's understandings that have really taken this one to heart, have changed from the responsibility of what was a sub-association, raised the plat. The sub-association was dissolved and all rolled into the master. And so the assertion is that there was 13 years of incorrect billing of a second HOA fee that shouldn't be there for the majority of those owners, only for a very few.
Dennis, it was legit because it was in declarant control at the time and they had filed for bankruptcy in 2011. So therefore it dissolved that association. So that part is legitimate, apparently.
Well, the thing is, the covenants are recorded. The declarant, I mean, I've seen that endlessly. During the 2008 time period when the recession took place, a lot of developers went back.
Yeah.
And they had declarant control in place. Well, those associations went null for a long period of time, and bankruptcy courts then awarded the declarant power to some other investor. That was absolutely wrong and illegal at the time.
So in this particular case, Power Ranch acquired the lands that were managed by the sub association, which are the fingertips around the houses as well as the public parks and pools. So, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I have read this document 6, 7, 8 times, and I didn't believe it at first. Those are owned by PRCA.
Without looking at it in details, I really can't comment on it, but it's suspect. And I think you always want to be very careful about a CCNR change. That is the constitution of your community. And changes to that constitution not only affect you, but affect every person downstream of you and your ability to sell that product. That's why the courts protect that right of you to have an opportunity to vote for or against any change to those CCNRs.
Are you familiar with the term special assessment area?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that has really meant in other developments?
And also special services.
So in
Special
some
service assessment too. They call out two in that document: special service assessment and special assessment.
So depending on how creative the lawyer was who wrote the CCNR, and like I said, 10,000 plus communities, 10,000 plus
It was
different CCNR. Okay. More reason to work, but the issue is they can in fact write in the original CCNRs the allocation of expenses for a small portion of the community to go to that portion and not affect the larger portion of the community. I have one community that I deal with a lot in Scottsdale, one association, 2 different parts, and one part of the association gets billed almost double the assessment of the other part. And that's built within that, but it's also abused by that board to start throwing more and more charges into the one portion.
Less and less.
And in fact, that community is almost 50-50 in size, but the slightly larger community has all the board members, and the smaller community has no board members because they outvote every single time. And that smaller community that pays the bigger assessment has no opportunity to change the way the board because of that election process. That is an unconscionable provision within the governing documents that can be challenged in court.
And that's what we have.
Taxation, representation.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, it's situational taxation without representation because the logistics of it prevents you from ever winning an election.
Well, and we are also treated not the same as the rest of Power Ranch. We're the last on the list to get everything. Any attention, we're the last on the list. Our 6-year plan started 9 years ago, or it'll be 9 years before it's done. It was a 6-year plan. It started 3 years ago.
It's a very common part. There's another in Ventura in the Northwest Valley. Many sub associations and ambassador associations, same thing. There's the upper class and the lower class, and one gets all of the bills and the other one doesn't.
I mean, we supplement Power Ranch, but we sustain ourselves too. I mean, we're paying for ourselves and we're supplementing Power Ranch, but we get less.
There are some things that I can do. I mean, I really worked on a draft to try to address that kind of problem. I haven't been able to come up with a solution yet that I believe is sellable to the legislature. I'm going to get through this year, and then whatever successes that we have this year, we'll build on next year.
I mean, we should be able to manage our own money and our own vendors. Because
Absolutely.
They are not, they have the same vendors coming into our area if there's enough time, if there's enough money left over, if.
Well, I also live in the Knolls, and but I want to go back to the parking issue. So it's all over.
this is a hypothetical. So let's say there are 10,000 households in Palm Ranch. I don't know what the number is. If only 3,000 households vote, yes, that means it goes to the city because only 30% of the households vote.
Well, the way the bill is written, it's the majority of those that vote. So if there's 3,000 people that vote and 1,501 vote against it, it goes to the city.
Okay.
So depending on how you vote, that's why it's important to vote. If they're going to hold the vote, you have to vote because the balance of the decision will be based on the number of votes submitted.
Or one house.
Okay? It's not a percentage of the total community. I don't have to achieve 50% of the 4,300 people in order to pass this. It's simply a majority of the people voting.
6 vote.
And the talks are, it will be included with the annual vote this year. So we have to get very educated on this because it will happen. The vote will happen. So you want to vote against it or for it, whatever, whichever.
Well, I just find that if this is happening in June, end of June, that this is the first I've heard about the street vote.
Yeah.
And so I just find it very surprising that it hasn't started percolating, and so people are aware of what's at stake. Now, I think I heard Ken mention the contentions that everybody needs to vote, but I live my street on Los Altos and Posse. It's owned by the city, or they call them this. They maintain, but yet I pay some street maintenance, which I should never have paid, in my view, 2 or 3 years ago. So if it's owned by the city, let them take care of it. So that's my
perspective as well.
Now, if I'm not too sure about the blue signs, but I understand they're private, and so that's a different issue. My understanding, according to what I've heard. Now, going back to one other comment I'll make, it just seems there's a lot of issues with the gophers. There's dead grass, dead landscaping.
Airbnb.
So my thing is nothing's going to change unless we attack the macro issue. The macro issue is the CCMC.
Yes.
To get rid of it. Because, as you said, until the board understands that they work for us, not be lapdog for the including yourself for that management organization. We're just spinning our wheels here, right? And the other thing is, I noticed when board members run for office, I read bios, glossy bios.
Yeah.
They're going to do this and this and that, but yet can't in future elections, a board member, if they run, be subject to contract with the alliance. If you fail to execute what the alliance wants, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Can't that be written in the election?
The greatest power you have is the power to vote for your board and the power to recall any board member that is not meeting your expectations of performance. So that's the things that I look to try to strengthen on. Unfortunately, none of the homeowners have any say in the management company. The management company gets to work, it works for the board. The board gets to decide who they hire and fire. The only thing that you have is accountability of that board to support your needs. Make your concerns known to the board. Screw the management company. Don't bother talking to them. Talk to your board, hold them accountable to hold the management company accountable to their terms.
Yeah. I've been here for 4 years. Be patient. Yes.
Pardon?
The board does it. Yeah.
Let me address that.
Okay.
I just see you have a question.
Okay.
We care. I spent my life on this area. That's correct. You care. Well, let me get some. Let me get it back.
Okay, but I'm like,
This board.
board says, half the board members are for the good of the community. Half the board members have their own agenda. And it's the one way to remember, depending on which way the wind blows, it's how we go.
It's a bike people.
Here's the nature, I would tell you, of the board. In the two that I've sat on, now this would be a third incarnation with a bunch of new people. Some individuals are very astute, educated, and used to making complex decisions, and some aren't. Some have ulterior motives for being there.
Yes.
Do not. I would tell you, to your point, that without a 4-3 vote, things don't get done. Right? We are one of 7. Right? Christy, myself, and we are one of 7. And so, I would tell you, I worked tirelessly. I didn't agree with everything done in the recall. I agree with the need for a recall of 2 individuals, for sure. I worked tirelessly behind the scenes to say, who do we think everybody can work with? And unfortunately, that kind of blew up for personal reasons, personal vendetta reasons, and people have watched it play out. So, to your point, we haven't had that party. It's been on my agenda since the beginning, right? And the board president is the one who sets our agenda or adjourns our meeting if he doesn't like what's being said. So, in as much as the individuals may or may not accomplish all of the goals that they set out to do, we are one of 7.
Well, we haven't also brought up the votes are coming up.
I'm sorry?
No.
Give him the mic.
That's gonna happen at every meeting.
I could hear you.
If you don't get an open mind for something, someone who's got an agenda on his bottom. This is gonna happen at every board meeting, and the residents of Homeowners on this consumption.
I would address that simply by saying, again, when there was a wish of the thought that I might be president, I had suddenly had all these phone calls from our vendors and our attorney and our management company. 7 features is what they need, right? So I would take that one step further. An individual who does not have the association with any of our vendors or take their direction, we are the bosses. 7 of it's our money for crying out loud. I am your elected representative, right? So my job is to you. And it's just a slippery slope of manipulation and collusion that happens between the 3 parties. And if you're not wise to that, that's where you pop this up in my life.
All of this is really manifest throughout the state. It's community after community. It's the same kind of thing. I've gone to communities and been able to replace an entire board with a recall. And I'll sit with those people and I'll tell them, be careful of what you wish for. If you are the new board members, remember what happened, what drove you to do this recall, and don't repeat it. And a year later, every time, a year later, I will go back to that community, and the new board is doing exactly the same thing that the old board did. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, no matter how well intentioned. Until you can get to a point where we, through statute, can define the true duties of boards to their community. My 3rd priority bill is a duty of the board. It's been established in common law. It's been established in case law, and yet not one board in this state knows the truth about what their duty is to the community, because the lawyers and the community managers tell them that the only thing that applies to you is the business judgment rule and not to any of you. That's an absolute false, and I will get that codified into law
And
this
by
year.
the way, I brought up an exact point in closed conversations, open conversations, and it's been disagreed with vehemently by our current board president, unfortunately. Right? Well, so like that. My job is not to the corporation. My job is to each one of you.
Well, and if they're gonna put in, because there's some talk about like putting in new codes or whatever, ethics or whatever, there's some written in there.
Let's face it,
One person.
The reason for those codes
is
to control Ann and myself, and not to
I
promote
get
it.
that. No. And what I see in there, and I see that. That's why I don't like it.
Right.
And there's one little hidden thing buried way in this 190-degree
Right.
or page document that says one person, only the president, will be able to voice his opinion and get things done without having the board to agree with it. Nobody on that board should have that single power to make any decision without
No
a combination of voting.
The board
Not one
acts as
single
a board,
person.
and no individual board member, even if they're a board president, has the authority to act for the body. The body is the only thing that governs this community, and the majority of the board have to vote on everything.
Everybody, and nothing should go through without agreed vote.
I would also say that piece of conversation of our agenda was not discussed, certainly with myself. I don't think it was with you. And you weren't on the board at that time. So that was a surprise. We're talking about
Exactly. And that, to me, that screams power hungry.
over landscape, which was delinquent, DRC, which was delinquent, right? The actual business of the community that makes it more beautiful. And
Right. Oh, no.
That was put to the backseat. So where that comes from, I mean,
Every board meeting is that way. It's not about the homeowners anymore. It's about backstabbing and fighting and what can we do to, turn the community upside down.
I don't want to go all the way down the road to all that stuff.
And if anybody dares to complain about anything on the board, you're immediately labeled as a troublemaker,
absolutely.
and the plague is assigned to you.
Oh, the angry mob.
Quick question. Who determines the verbiage of that referendum? That in the statute?
It's in statute.
It's in the statute.
I did. Yeah.
What was your question?
Who determines the verbiage? I've seen these things put out where you got to vote contrary to what you want.
Right.
They can be really twisted.
I made it. The lawyers tried to get the language so that they could manipulate it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't let it happen.
Okay, so it's a straightforward question, yes or no? Okay. All right.
Yes or no? Simple majority
Okay.
decides the issue.
All right.
Simple majority.
Again, everything you experience is experienced in a lot of communities across this state. The only way that we can truly fix this is to change statutes, to get the interpretation of law out of the hands of lawyers and into the English language in the statute. Clarity in the law eliminates the ability of the lawyer to make his own law. The lawyers are your enemy. Understand that. They are not working in your best interest. They are not even working in the best interest of your board. Their client is the corporation, which is an entity in space. Okay? It is not people. And they will advise in the best interest of the corporation and not any of you.
Well, what do we do when we do have a power?
Hang on. Sorry, I was spoken here.
When we have that power hungry thing going on in our own board to eliminate certain people that, they can't control their brains and get them to go one way and only, side with them. And then they want to, I just want people to get along on this board and have a common goal to help the community and not be about the power.
The fundamental premise of these communities was established by CAI, which are the lawyers. CAI established that you're going to be incorporated, and as a corporation, the Constitution doesn't apply to you. Okay? That's their intent. The reality is you never use a way or a condominium that even resembles a corporation. They don't build a product. They don't sell a service. They don't do anything. Every dime they have comes out of assessments. The same as a municipality. You are more a city than you are a corporation. The association wants to use, the lawyers want to use that premise of corporate law to escape the open meeting law, because there's no open meeting law in corporations. They also want to use the fact that the corporations are not subject to the Constitution. The Constitution protects the people from their government. The government in this case, the pseudo-government, is your HOA. We are going to make it part of statute that the HOA has no right to infringe on your constitutional rights of free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom to petition your governing body to redress grievances. The 10 bills of the 10 articles of the Bill of Rights apply to each and every one of you in this community, and we have to change that in law to shut up the lawyers who dictate otherwise.
Hey, just touching it, Christy.
I just had a question about management companies, because our board has approved for us to start looking. That's a fact. And I'm kind of new to all of this, and so I was curious, what experiences have you had in large HOAs like this one, switching out their management company, and how does that work, and does it improve anything? I mean, what is your experience?
I think I mentioned earlier on, all management companies in the state are the same. There's none that are better than others. There are some that are worse than others. The difference is how your board regulates and manages that company. Okay? You can change. It's a complicated process to change the management company, because there's a lot of record transition. And quite frankly, there's a lot of records that are lost in the changing of management companies because they don't maintain them well. But the process of the finances, of transferring all of the accounts, looking at signature authority to all your accounts, all of that is a complicated process. It takes about 30 days of dedicated work to change the company. But if you want different results, you've got to have a board that reads the contract, that doesn't buy into a single word that they don't agree to be right. There are a tool called memorandums of understanding. Most management companies will never change their boilerplate of their contracts. But your board can insist in a memorandum of understanding that this provision doesn't apply, this provision doesn't apply. We're not going to do that way. We're going to do it this way. When they build that contract that way, and they start overseeing the expectations of that management company on how they treat all of you, you will find a better difference, no matter who is your management company from there.
Christy, I'd like to give you some kind of background. From the time that the recall was finalized and new board members were put in place, where we had some time of getting along, we put our treasurer and president at that time in charge of second signature on every dollar that went out, and tasked CCMC to gather, I forget how many years of historic documents for this exact reason, right? So that we own the data, right? The homeowners own the data, not the management company that's at transition risk.
Good idea. Good idea.
Dennis, would you recommend that the community looks into other law firms ahead of other management companies?
Any law firm would be better than what you have. While I don't recommend management companies, there is only one law firm that represents HOAs that I've worked with extensively on the opposite end of the equation, but that I believe is a good choice for any community. That community is Vale Forthingham VF Law out of Tempe. They're association attorneys, so they carry a lot of the dead weight of the rest of the association attorneys, but they understand the fundamental principles of property servitude law, and they teach it. They guide you based on the premise of what truly governs these communities. And they're the only law firm that has at least will provide you that service. In a training session from any lawyer from BF Law, they will tell you what's right, what's wrong, and what you should be thinking about in making decisions as a board, which no other law firm will ever do.
Thank you. With regard to changing out management companies, and your opinion that, yeah, it's a lot of work, given that we had 20 plus years of place and company, would there be value in that for a fresh start, even though the responsibility is really changing the culture of the board, as you described? Is there value if you were to change that to have a new start?
There would be no value in changing a management company without first getting the heads of your board screwed on correct.
Yes. The election, right? We need people who will stay focused on the problem. We need people that will run it. We need people that won't get into petty conversations about whatever it might be. We need people who will serve and stay united in that front. So I nominate Tim.
I second that.
Right.
Having a name for me.
Have any communities already voted to turn the parking over to the city and been successful that were A and C community?
There was one community that if the law became effective on the I think September 30th of last year, not this current year, last year, 2023. And there was one community that forced the vote on the, I think 5 days before the law was actually effective. Because they wanted to force the issue and only allow limited discussion on the issue. The motion passed in that community because the homeowners didn't have a chance. They were told one story, scared out of their pants, and voted accordingly. And actually, it was illegal because they voted on something that really wasn't effective law yet. But that's an example of one that did. There have been, I don't know if there's been others. 10,000 communities, I'm not in touch with all of them. But for the most part, they're waiting for this year, and they'll address it either at an annual meeting or in conjunction with an annual meeting so that they don't have to have a second meeting. So I suspect that whatever annual meetings come around the first of the year or the first quarter of next year, that's when the vote will be held.
I have a question on the call. I have a question on the call. On Rainy Trail, for example. Saying that's controlled by the city. And it's like a disaster area waiting for a big accident. They come out of the driveways without looking like it's their street. And I almost have no car taken out. And there are cars on both sides. So you can't even pull over unless you're in a driveway. None of my family went down the street. They're terrified of it. And the only way we get to fix that, I'm afraid to have the whole community.
Well, I think what will happen is when the responsibility to regulate the streets gets transferred to the city will actually send somebody to survey all the streets and then decide where are we going to put parking restrictions. They haven't had that responsibility for the whole time. They've owned them, but they haven't.
We control enforcement currently, and that's what's up for vote. I can tell you, Christy.
Once it gets transferred over, they will actually send either the fire department or the police department to basically walk or drive through every street and decide what are the safety requirements necessary for this street to ensure the ability of emergency vehicles to access it at any time of the day or night.
And that has been done a while ago in the village. Has it been done again yet? No, it's on the docket to be done again. Oh, it's not. Okay. So, but as the village was very concerned about that because they have a perennial problem that's probably never going to go away, and they can only ameliorate it. But right, so that is absolutely something that the village has done in the past and has talked about doing in the future, and the town of Gilbert is required to do that.
Who put up all
I
the
was also
signs?
gonna say that Morrison Ranch had a similar situation where the city went out, the town surveyed, and now they have certain streets that you can park on one side. They have signage related to where you can park and when you don't. So it is possible, and it does happen to have a city come and regulate that.
And I would also say that Morrison Ranch, it has a variety of levels of homes, right? Started building up the chain. And I don't think they have parking enforcement at all in Morrison Ranch. So for what that's worth. Because there are folks who feel like, oh my gosh, our house is going to look like a terrible war zone, right? With cars.
Already does.
In some it does, sure. But I would tell you in Morrison Ranch that I'm 99% sure they do not have parking enforcement.
And that'll save you money.
Yeah.
$127,000, I believe.
Mhm.
122, something like that.
Oh, so I'll just give it to AAA.
So it's $125 for the contract, but also every time they run a license plate, it's an additional $40 per license plate that is not part of the contract.
Plus the expense to collect the money, plus the expense to mail, plus the expense to write the letter, plus, right? So for these and I happen to live in a neighborhood where I don't feel like I have a problem, and like y'all do with the normals, right? That's why I personally don't care if we enforce parking. Although, like I said, it's an important issue for a lot of people. It needs to be voted on, but to the point of control.
Ken makes a good point. It may not affect you personally, but you get to vote for what's best for the whole community. Please consider that as a whole when you vote. Whether it affects you or not, if it doesn't affect you, it's one thing, but you're part of this whole community. And you only get one opportunity to vote. Express your concerns, protect your rights from abuse and harassment.
And I'll add that they are fighting hard, the law firm and who's overseeing our community with the parking enforcement. They're fighting really hard to keep this. They had a meeting in here late one night. I was out walking. Oversee and Carpenter Hazelwood Law was in here with homeowners from a different community. This room was packed, and they were trying to sell them on keeping this enforcement.
Well, it seems their job if we don't enforce it. You're supposed to have a reason.
I wonder if they would be able to rent the room.
Questions? So, we're obviously a font of information. I don't know if there's more questions. I know I've been talking for quite some time. Dennis, what's your website?
HOAtruth.com. I have business cards up front here. If anybody wants any, please grab one. It has my contact numbers, my email. The website is a wealth of information. I try to build it to provide all of you as much information as I can. There's case law descriptions. There's a lot of commentary back and forth. I spend the entire day either answering questions or on a phone with some homeowners across the state.
I would tell you he's been extremely receptive to all of my questions before I was a board member and now after. And I would encourage you all to reach out, sign up for his newsletter, because that's the main way to communicate.
Sign up on the website, become a member, totally free. You get added to my communications, and when I need help, I will reach out to all of you at once.
To pass legislation, there's specific steps.
A legislative district, then your senator is president of the Senate. Very powerful individual. Let him know that you need help. And he will help us. He's a good man.
Yeah.
Lauren Hendricks, the same way. I don't know your second
Wait,
representative.
who's the president of the Senate?
Pardon?
Who's the president?
Warren
of the Senate?
Peters.
Okay. Are there other questions before we take Dennis?
I'm just curious, a macro, based on your experience, and I think you've seen some of the worst within our community in terms of the management company. Are we the bottom of the barrel, in the middle, or what are we?
I won't say, no, not at all. I mean, there's some incredible associations out there. There's a community in Oro Valley that I think is probably the most abusive community I've ever seen. You've had a naive board with a self-serving management company and attorney, but you've got a beautiful community. You've got a lot of things working for you. You've got people interested in finding change, finding things better. That's what I look to do, not to regulate these communities, make them better places to live. When we can do that, I can't make HOAs go away. I'd love to, but I can't. It's a flawed concept because it fails to recognize human nature and the power to affect human nature decisions. But I can't make them go away. What I can do is try to make it so empower all of you to share the power with your board, to have more say in the running of your community. And that's where I ask you for help. Help me help all 3.5 million of the homeowners in this state find a better place to live. There aren't a lot of choices other than HOAs and condos. Half of the state population lives in one of those communities. The other half are in apartments or in individual homes.
Katie, just some other questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. So, well, not necessarily a question, but kind of something that you said, Dennis, that kind of struck me is that I live in the Knolls, so it's a certain subdivision of our apartment Power Ranch, and it's been treated very differently over the past since 2011. And when you said that we're all kind of one and we all should be concerned for each other, I just kind of, some people know about this and the committee members do. In 2011, our land was deeded over to the master. We were supposed to be a subdivision, or I'm sorry, a sub-association, sorry, I'm nervous. We were supposed to be a sub-association, but a new set of CCNRs were drafted that took away our right to be a sub-association. CCMC and our lawyer have been treating us like that since 2011, but have not been honoring the correct CCNRs. So basically, they've been treating us like the original set. They've been operating off of that. They tell us that when they tell us we can have a sub-association. Everyone's heard our vice president accuse people of saying things about, oh, you know, someone's trying to elicit the Knolls to break away from the master, stuff like that. And I've heard that Jennifer Partridge, the executive director, has also said to me personally that we can break away from the master and be our own sub-association and stuff like that, but that's not the correct thing. CCMC and on our Power Ranch website have been having the 2006 CCNRs have been operating incorrectly off of that. The Knolls, all the single family homes directly, should not be paying 2 HOA dues. They just shouldn't. And maybe the patio style homes and the bungalow style homes should have a smaller, like, special assessment fee, but it should not be the two that they are. Our president, Gordon, is going to the very same attorney that drafted these CCNRs in 2011, and gonna ask him to consult him to admit apparently to his $1 million mistake. So I just want to let you know that that's another highlight, essentially, of how CCMC and our lawyer have essentially taken advantage of 683 homeowners and have been operating incorrectly. There is a website out there, it's knollspr.com. It's put together to try to educate homeowners in regards to what has been going on. The documentation is there to support basically everything that's been claimed. And also there is a link there to help donate, because I believe it's important as a community for us to get a second opinion from a lawyer who is a third-party lawyer, not our lawyer, because I don't believe our lawyer is interested in admitting his mistake. So I just kind of wanted to let everyone know that is out there, and that is it's a blatant example of how our attorney and CCMC have been mismanaging our community and taking advantage of us. So.
And I commend you for that work, because that's a great message. That you are a community of many sub-communities. What affects one will affect all of you, one way or another. That if, even though they are you're all sub-communities, if one community is abused, then I believe, like I said, without looking at the details, that what happened to you in your CC&R change was illegal today. And the lawyer knew it, didn't care, because he knows unless he's challenged in court, he will have the association's money to spend to fight you, and you have to spend your money to fight the association. That is a winnable case, but, you know, when you sue the association, nobody wins but the lawyers.
Right, so I would just hope that the board, my hope is not to sue the association and to hurt my fellow homeowners, right? That's not the intention. The intention is to raise a retainer for $3,000 to have John DeSalis look into basically the documentation further and write a demand letter to our attorney, which in hopes is basically having our board turn around and hold CCMC and our lawyer who drafted and did all this stuff, hold them accountable for what they've done to a subset of Power Ranch that it's egregious in my opinion. We can only go back 6 years, but that's a lot of money. If you look at it, the Knowles pays right now currently $234 a quarter on top of your $348 that the master pays, and go back to 2011. You know, and they obviously don't honor our rules. They don't take care of our landscaping. They don't do the things that we pay for the additional fees for. So my hope is that you guys get a handout. You're able to look at the website. If you're able to donate $5 to help for this retainer, I would greatly appreciate it. It's $3,000. We're at $200 right now. I put everything out on Friday, and you know we've been trying to work towards getting it done, so that way we can just have a third-party opinion and we can be well informed as homeowners. So.
Thanks, Katie.
Are there other questions? Well, we've got Dennis and his brain and his experience.
One more. When we vote for our board members, and I don't remember, I've lived in here for 16 years, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Is it notated on the ballot whether they're incumbents or not?
Usually in people's bios, I would assume. No, I don't. Honestly, I never paid attention to the last election, to be very bluntly honest.
I've never seen an incumbent slot.
Well, we knew what
Because we see
term part
names.
was left.
Yeah.
We see names, but we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to know when we vote if there's an asterisk behind if they're a current board member.
Well,
Well-
renewing board members. I would just tell you, there are no renewing board members. We've always liked everybody in the West. Ann and I are new. Well, Ann's for another year, I believe. I'm for another 2 years. Mike Stone's for another 2 years. Jen Rhodes another 2 years. So the only ones that are coming up for election are the positions of Gordon, that he's currently in, and Crystal. So
we have a clean slate, is what you're saying.
basically, there's only two votes open, 2 seats open in this vote, and I don't know. Well, Gordon and Crystal have both, if and when they decided to appoint someone, which is within their purview, but that's very unfortunate in my mind. But if they appoint someone, that person will be there for a month.
That's fishy too.
Just something about elections. Just something about elections. So no, there it does not say if somebody is an incumbent, how long they have served on a board, or what other positions they've held on the board over the years. In fact, in our association, we have board members who just one time they're vice president and then they serve on a committee and then the next time they're president over many, many years, and we don't know that. There's very limited information when it comes to voting. The only event that the association has to basically vet the candidates is a one-time meet and greet of the candidates. There's also only a few paragraphs where they get to write why they're running, what interests them, and that's it. That's what we vote on. And I think what we've heard from Dennis is those elections are very, very important, and we need to be voting in people who are qualified, who want the best for our community, and we also have to do our research. And we have to ask that the management company gives us more information about the candidates.
I would tell you also that a large group of us last year went out to fellow homeowners and donated our own money, about $3,000, so that you received postcards and had open meet and greets outside of the HOA, right? Outside of something provided by Power Ranch. And I'm pretty confident that that'll probably be happening again. To actually campaign, and which I absolutely did.
When's the vote going to happen? Or
It'll be in the February meetings will be announced. Don't know exact dates, and I believe the vote will be open sometime in early February, like it was last year. Follows the same cadence, okay. And an email will probably go out for a call for opening probably in January would be my guess.
That's why I was wondering, because nothing's kind of been said.
I'm sorry, say again?
I mean, nothing had been said, and I thought it was coming up, so
right.
I wanted to make sure we had enough time to go on stuff.
I guess my question is to you three that are here that are on the board.
I'm not.
I know you're not. And I heard when you got elected, you said you were in it to help the people when you were put into place, that you would help the people and no one else. And I appreciate that. That's all we ask about.
Yeah.
And we've served on boards, I've served on many different things, and I've never seen the discontent that I witnessed at the last meeting. And we're all adults, but I don't know who to trust anymore. And so maybe I'm speaking for one or many of us here, but I want to be able to trust you guys. And I want to be able to have you guys put your best foot forward to show that we can come to you and you actually represent us and not have an individual thing. That you're as a united front, no matter who else fills those seats, and that's what you're going to stand for.
I'll ask you to ask yourself maybe. Ken and I put our money out to rent this facility to have Dennis come to speak. We wanted to get we want to get information out. We want there to be transparency. The lawsuit. I went through years of financials and spreadsheeted a lot of things to find out that we were in the midst of a lawsuit. I asked around. I was brand new to the community, and I asked around, and I asked homeowners who have been here from the very beginning, do you know what's going on? Have you been notified? No one knew. And so, yes, I am labeled as the villain for exposing this stuff, but I believe homeowners have the right to know. Homeowners, you know, I've managed communities where homeowners just pay money and they just don't know, but we want the information out there, especially in this community. So this is the reason why Dennis is here.
I just shared with a couple of people that no board hijacks, no hijinks like you've seen from the front of the room, where we see, you know, personal attacks I mean, that's really what happened, right? And a series of them over multiple months to inflame that without, certainly not any conversation with me. I can't speak for anybody else, right? And the mass resignations that happened that seemed to be kind of coordinated behind the scenes. I just don't think it's appropriate. We need to stay focused on the business of the community, not being bureaucratic and writing policies that go on ad nauseum. Can we get clean lakes and pretty trees? Can we just do that?
Right.
Can we get color bonds that aren't blueberry and pumpkin and all the different, can we do the business of the community to make it a nicer place to live? I love what Jen's doing on the lifestyle committee. Like, she's perfect for that. And I love that she's doing right. Power Ranch was known, although it wasn't something that we did as a family, but Power Ranch was known for that. And I I love that that's what she's doing. I love, unfortunately we lost Matt, which is tragic because he's brilliant and great with our budget. And we really need to get into our vendors and focus on our management company, our attorney, and how they manage our vendors. End story.
And also to add to that, I just want to, if Dennis can either confirm or deny this, but I truly believe that whoever you elect into the 2 seats this upcoming election, truly look at them as, are they in this, do they see it as, first of all, do they have a need for power? Because really, this isn't about power. There's nothing to gain power over. And then secondly, I really want you to look at whether or not that person is listening to you as the homeowners, or are they listening and taking direction from the management company? It should be the opposite. It should be the board and the person managing the managers.
Now, you guys mentioned there was going to be a meet and greet for these 2 candidates.
Yeah.
When is that going to?
I don't know who's going to be running yet, but I will tell you my commitment is to really work with whoever's going to be running to get their messaging out, to make sure that we can stay focused on whoever is running so that we stay focused on the actual problem. So I don't know who those meet and greets might be. Rich, CCMC does do one. We did several around various neighborhoods. And I'm confident that whoever will be running will be doing those meet and greets all seats of the country because they need to understand who they represent. And I want harmony on our board. We had it for about 30 or 45 days. We lost.
In closing, I'll just offer to any of the board members. I'm free. Use me.
He's the best HOA therapist I know.
Do the right thing on that.
Yeah.
So our next board meeting,
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Our next board meeting is Monday night. I believe we're 6:30 Monday night at 6:30. As voiced by our previous board member, we completed. I don't know how that's going to go. Right? It could go a number of different ways. I hope that the business of the community will be put first ahead of policies and other things. However, I encourage you to come.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
And real quick, just because like the parking and streets and all that, and that's the first time I've heard of that. Are there any other hot topics that are going to come on this meeting that we need to be aware of?
Have you been coming to board meetings?
A couple, but they've often kind of
Just yeah.
Is there, I mean, just real bullet items?
Well, I would tell you that we've got critical landscape items, DRC items. The one thing that wasn't passed was finance. That had to be done last board meeting. We've got the thing that absolutely has to, in my opinion, be taken care of is our voting system. Our current voting system is more expensive and has the ability to be manipulated. That was on the agenda, didn't get to it. That, to my mind, is the only thing that has to be absolutely handled because our election is right on the corner. I don't know if the resigning board members are going to be nominating somebody for approval. I don't know that. Maybe others do, but I don't. I given the hijinks that went down at the last meeting, I don't think it's possible that they're winning.
It's important, yeah.
Another hot topic, in my opinion, and probably Dennis would agree, is that our board is set to vote on who we have collected our fines. That was on the agenda at one time. It got tabled because our board needed more information, but that is one piece of legislation that Dennis has helped to champion, would be that our association fines and stuff don't have to be done just by our lawyer. We can actually bid out for other collection agencies. That to me is a very big issue that the board faces also.
And I would tell you that the vendors that have been provided have all come from CCMC, so I found it probably the other options. So again, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Yeah.